Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are here with another podcast. This time it's the Americas region. You know who we all are, but in case you have missed the EU groups, my name is Brandon, aka B Dog. I'm joined by Hawker, Lucy, and Yumi. We are wearing different clothes. It is a different day, so the illusion has been broken. So we're going to talk about the America region. First off, before we get into that, you guys are doing all right since yesterday. How are we feeling? Good?
Good.
Cool.
Yeah,
Great.
doing good.
Easy, light work. All right, let's just get straight into the teams because there's some exciting teams to talk about. I feel like a lot of us are familiar with most of them. There's some new guys just kind of coming in. So let's kick things off with everyone's favorite, Liquid. They are currently, well, they're on a pretty good run in EPL. They're in the semi-final. They're about to take on Cloud9, and they've got pretty high expectations of themselves. They think that they can beat them. But in terms of the RMR, I feel like that they're a pretty nailed on choice to make it through. I feel like the resurgence, just the addition of Yakindar has been very beneficial to Liquid. I think, Hawker, I know you did some videos having a look at Liquid recently. With the addition of Yakindar, is it enough for them just to have that factor? I know Elijah's been stepping up significantly since he's been added to the roster. But what do you make of that whole situation?
It's just crazy if you look at Yakindar's opening kill stats. He's attempting like 10% more opening kills than anyone else at Pro League. Literally anyone else. It's crazy. His entry stats are on a whole different level, which is just adding such a ridiculous dynamic to this team. And I just like how the roster makes sense now when I look at it. I feel like for a while it didn't fully make sense with some of the roles sometimes. Now you do have like a really obvious baseline for this team. And that even includes having OC as an AWPer who I don't think is going to be crazy active, but I think he just has to fill a role on this team. So I really like all the moves they've made. I also think getting Daps in as a coach has probably been a big part of why they've been able to shift their style somewhat. And it just seems like this team makes so much sense now when you look at all the roles. It just feels like a really well put together roster. They're just a really solid team now. I'm pretty confident that Liquid aren't going to have any troubles here.
I think the only concern to me is OC, right? You did mention him, and he's had some highs and lows. It feels like he can pop off and have these crazy games, but he also has these big runs of red, right? Where he'll go like a couple of series in a row where he won't put up a positive rating. And that could be a bit of a liability, like kind of when you're competing at that top level. It seems that with Elise being able to step up alongside Yakinda, they're not kind of lacking in that firepower department. But, you know, that their target isn't just to sort of be the best in NA. They want to be in the best in the world. And OC needs to be maybe a little bit more consistent before they can be that kind of beast that they used to be as Team Liquid. But still looking really good. Yakinda, sounds like maybe that deal is on its way as well, which that's probably a bit of a reassuring thing for the rest of the squad. And kind of going into this major, that's a bit of a psychological benefit as well.
Yeah, my impressions of Liquid have changed. I mean, I wasn't expecting Yakindar to be such a heavy force. I mean, I was expecting that in the initial events that would be maybe the case, but he'd start to adapt and things would be a bit more spread out, like distribution wise for the team. But I actually liken this team a lot to Furia, and I sympathize with OC a lot because I think if you look at Furia's journey, they've actually struggled to find an AWPer that fits what the art vision is, and I think Yakindar's change in the way that he's approaching, especially T-side rounds, he has effectively brought in like almost like a Furia-esque style where there's like great solid riflers around him that can recover rounds. And I don't think OC is quite there yet in terms of like his individual playmaking abilities. I think he was way more systems oriented in his previous teams. I think this has been a bit of a culture shock for him. And I'm not sure, even if they theoretically wanted to get an AWPer to like elevate this team, I don't even know who they could get to fill that void, because Furia haven't been able to fill that void for themselves. So the only one that really made sense was Henny, and there aren't really that many hyper aggressive AWPers that are really willing to go kind of balls to the wall and go for these ridiculous playmaking opportunities. But I agree. I don't think Liquid will have any issues dealing with the Americas RMR.
Yeah, I feel like that sentiment's just kind of echoed across the whole group. I personally don't think they'll have too much trouble. I think it's very interesting just speaking about the whole OC debate, because when he first came in, obviously you got that honeymoon period with with Liquid. But he's had to adjust to quite a lot since coming in from Extra Salt. He's had to adjust to various IGL changes. He's now got a culture shift coming in, and yeah, I think the Yakindar revelation is really cool to see, and I'm excited to see where that team can progress. I think we're talking about teams, well, OC, Extra Salt, also the Complexity boys, right? They're looking very good. They qualified to the playoffs of EPL recently. I really rate the Halzerk pickup that has come in. I think that he's really revolutionized that team. I feel like they were suffering a lot from kind of really bad energy just in the camp. Just from the outside looking in, I've got no like real anything to base that off. So that's all just assumption. But also, I think the revelation for me, and one thing I mentioned in some of these Pinnacle podcasts before with Pro League, is obviously Grim had an exceptional event recently, but also the resurgence of Fang. I feel like Fang is a very understated player within Complexity, and I feel like when he's playing quite well and quite consistent, because he went through such a terrible run of form, to be honest. And Grim is that player that is now stepping up, really coming into the ranks. And then you've got 3 good riflers that JT can kind of call around. I feel like, Yumi, for Complexity, do you see them as just kind of making it just through quite comfortably, just being in the challenger spot, or do they push for Legends?
Yeah, I know it's an interesting question. The problem that you have is that unfortunately there aren't a lot of legend spots to give, which is my main concern. But I think that they have the ability to do it. I really like this team as well, and you're talking about somebody like Fang having a resurgence. That's actually linked to Halzerk because he actually had to change roles because of Junior's, let's say, not prowess in terms of like approaching T-side rounds. Had to change things structurally, and has said so much in an interview. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, but the fact that they've been able to land on a new AWPer that is just stable, has worked with legends of the game as well in Dignitas. Like, the expectations of him was that you come in, you do a good job, and we're going to thrive. And they've pretty much landed on that. And this is only the baseline of what we're seeing with Complexity. We could even see some Halzerk star moments still yet to be seen. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's just impressive to me how I don't want to say Halzerk's an average AWPer, but I am going to say he's an average AWPer. And yet he's made such a big difference to this team. And I really do think that the big part of it is, firstly, what Yumi was saying, in that it is probably helping just players like Fang be able to play better. They talked about how that was a problem. But secondly, JT is a really good caller. I was so impressed at Pro League. His calling was incredible. It felt like he was out calling some of the top teams in the world in a lot of those scenarios where he was just getting the reads right. He obviously wants to call quite a structured style as well in general, from what I see. And Junior was kind of the opposite of what you need for that, because it felt like his problem was more over peaking and taking too many fights and taking these re-peaks when he didn't need to. So if you just have a solid AWPer now, I think it just gives JT much more of an ability to be able to use his calling. And he's really showing now that as purely an in-game leader, I think he's very, very good. Grim has obviously just been a complete revelation as he's actually getting put in star spots. And then you have someone like Floppy, who, if Liquid ever wanted to pick up a player and put him in like sort of the Grim positions when they did pick up Grim, I feel like they should have gone for someone more like Floppy, because I don't think he demands much space on this team, and yet he does his job solidly. And it's just so nice to see Complexity finally being a team that we can get excited about. There were the memes for so long about them, and yeah, just one change completely has changed the mood in the community around this team, and with good reason. They're actually looking like a good team now.
Yeah, now the memes are positive, right? You know, the highest number of mullets, the highest chance of winning is what I think for Complexity. And I think it's also like with Halzerk, it's kind of like this character, right, that comes in and you sort of touched on it, like the the vibe was maybe a little somber and complexity for a while, and just having someone come in that's this bit of a character fits in perfectly, completely out of left field. No one kind of expected this from Halls, like this almost reinvention that he's gone through to become this author in complexity. And he doesn't have to be super flashy when all of the rifles are able to step up around him. Been really impressed by what I've seen from complexity. I'm all in on them. I have them as my 3-0 actually. I think they're a real upset to go through. I mean, I don't think it's an upset now after we watched that FaZe game where they almost 2-0'd FaZe, right? So great stuff from complexity.
It's actually quite funny, the idea that I actually think that Junior is almost like a worse version of Henny. Like, he thinks he can hit all the shots, he thinks he can have all these star rounds, and then it just ends up looking poor. And there are a few teams that can make that work. Like, theoretically, if Junior was consistent at that role, that might even be a good pickup for Liquid, but I don't think anybody's really looking at Junior very seriously after his recent debacles. I think this is a huge red mark on him as an AWPer, and complexity, just the fact that they continue to rise and show off what they've got, because even when they had Junior, they looked competitive in games. The structure looked decent enough with the riflers, and they just didn't get production out of what is the most expensive weapon to buy in the game.
Yeah, all I was about to say was just kind of honestly nothing related to that. I was just going to say, talking about Lucy's point, is I saw like a tweet. I can't remember. It was one of the complexity players, but they said that Halzerk is the most non-American American they've ever met in their lives, which is just hilarious to me. Like, that's just really funny. But okay, that's good. We're all on the complexity bandwagon. That's nice. I'm glad that we're all in agreement, because they got a real like soft spot in my heart. Let's talk about a team that has also a soft spot in the Brazilian scene a little bit, Imperial. I mean, I feel like these guys, they always will somehow make it through. They came second in Melbourne. They lost out to Pain, another Brazilian team that we're going to speak about in just a couple of moments. But I don't know, you've got Fallen of third. It was the quote-unquote last dance, and they bring in Cello, which is... I don't know, a little bit interesting for me personally. Lisa, I can see you smiling there. What's your opinions on Imperial?
I mean, the storyline demands it, right? They have to be there. And FNX is coaching, so, yes, FNX, yes, Major. And I think also, like, Cello does add this kind of new ceiling for the fragging, right? FNX did feel a little bit lost at times. You could kind of tell that he wasn't kind of on the same level as some of the old guys that are still playing in that squad. And Cello's come through and is looking pretty good. That first outing at ESL Challenger Melbourne, despite losing to Pain, I think they look pretty impressive considering it was their first time together as the squad. I think they do go through here pretty well, and I'd love to see them do a deep run. It would just be such a good story.
Yeah, I think Imperial are a solid team all in all. FNX, first off, I hated that whole narrative that people were spinning, like, oh, well, he's attended every major and those are the majors that they've won. It's like, yeah, okay. We knew that was just superstition. He's not some like good luck charm. We're just wheeling him along and saying, okay, well, we can't lose now. So replacing him with an up and comer, and one that is as a high impact as Cello, that can not only change the calling for Imperial to a certain degree, because he's got some experience, I think, in that camp as far as I'm aware. But he also just has very solid fragging. So you think about the ceiling for Fur, Bolts, Cello, Vinny. All of these guys have fantastic rifling capabilities, and then you have Fallen on that AWP that can, sometimes be a bit hit or miss. I won't pretend like he's the most consistent player on Imperial, but he is going to be able to find the high impact frags that are going to win you games. So I'm up on Imperial. I think that this team, even if they went with somebody like a Phelps, perhaps, somebody else that has shown that they can rifle at a top level, but maybe is a bit rough around the edges, they could have made this roster work for the Americas RMR. So I have them comfortably going in as well.
Oh, okay. I might go against the grain slightly here then, because the thing that concerns me is looking at the result from Melbourne. Fallen was the highest rated player on this team at Melbourne. I just don't know if that's going to be happening going forwards. I don't see this Fallen resurgence where he is going to become a star AWPer again. He did really well at Melbourne. Maybe he can prove me wrong. but I don't see Fallen coming back to this level. I think obviously the FNX move had to happen. I don't want to be too harsh on FNX, but he just simply was not good enough on this team. I think he probably knows that. And I think it is a really good pickup. Cello was playing well. Looks like he also plays a little aggressive, and that's nice to see. The real turning point for me on this team will be Fur, because Fur was actually incredible in the last major cycle, and around that period, his form was really, really good. I was so surprised that he was still able to play his style and be so good. But you look at his numbers this year, he's been really average. He's been really average so far throughout this year. So if he can pick it up heading into this RMR, that's when I look at this team and say they should be making it through. But I'm not sure whether or not that's going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then I don't know if they have a real standout player. I guess Cello is starting to bring more of that. But I think it was just, Fur was just so good for me on this team previously that even if he were to improve his form, he would have to improve it so much. And I also have to point out, they did lose against Pain, who are another team we'll probably talk about in a bit, at Melbourne. So you really have to rely on assuming the experience of this team is enough to pull them through the RMR. And I don't know if some of these other teams are going to get as nervous now in the RMR. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but I feel like some of these other teams are starting to get that bit more experience now. I'm not sure if they have as much of an edge in that aspect anymore.
Yes, I mean, but do they have experience flying overseas to Sweden to do everything?
Ooh. True,
That's a whole other angle, unfortunately, that they'll have to consider because of the, well, it's visas and the sort that ended up being a part of the reason, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's something that I'm going to go against you with Hawker a little bit. I feel like the fact that it is international and the fact that they've already got this experience, as Yumi's saying, and it's the entire storyline. It's best of ones as well. I feel like you get up, you're an up and coming Brazilian team that makes it through to the Americas RMR, or you're one of these lesser known Americas teams that have made it through. You get your best of one schedule. You look at it and you go Imperial. I'd be worried. Like I would be worried. I feel like they are expecting themselves to be there as a minimum expectation, and I feel like they will do whatever they can to make sure that they are there in Rio. So for me, I have got them going through. I feel like it will be difficult for them to do it, but I just feel like the whole storyline, the whole way that it's going to be, I feel like it's written in the stars that Imperial will make it there. Another team that I've also got going through as well is the team that beat them in Melbourne, Pain. I'm really up on Pain. I think they're very good. I feel like Skulls was MVP easily in Melbourne. He played so incredibly well. And that roster is just it's come together. It's been together for a little bit of a while. I feel a bit bad for Pain in some respects. I feel like sometimes they get to a really good ceiling and then their player gets poached. And then another one comes in. A really good example is just Safe to Furia, right? It's that they're performing incredibly well, and then Safe goes to Furia. That hasn't really worked out, I feel like, for both for Furia. But Pain have now brought in some younger talent. They're looking pretty good. I mean, we talk about Pain. Does anyone want to jump in here and just kind of explain like what you feel like they're going to bring to the table here? Because I feel like they're going to be on a very upward trajectory. I know Melbourne was a little bit ago, but that's still a very big event to win, especially if you're Pain.
Yeah, they're unfortunately a team that I think most people will sleep on, especially if you're not paying attention. Like, it took me even with the Melbourne result, like I watched Melbourne, and when I initially looked at this draft, I saw Pain in there, and I still thought of like the old version of Pain for some reason. I don't think this new roster has quite made that mark yet for people to know to think of them as a threat. But I think if they go up against the likes of Furia or an Imperial or even a Liquid, I think they'd be surprised how much harder they're going to find it now that teams are prepping for them to be a contender. It just the way in which you prepare as an opposing team does shift slightly. You know, you're mainly hammering in your own strategies and your fundamentals and making sure that everything is nice and sound in terms of making sure there's like no blind spots on your CT setups and things like that. But when you know you're going up against a contender, you start also noting down some of the tendencies, and you try and find sort of anti-strat material for certain players, especially to make them less effective or actually just take them out of rounds entirely. So I'm worried for Pain. I am also up on them at the moment. I think that definitely can do some damage at this event because yeah, it was a major surprise that Skulls and Zevi were just slotting in instantly like that. But I also am concerned that the pressure of getting to the major, as well as the additional preparation that these guys are going to be having put against them, might actually just be too much for them to handle too quick.
On the flip side, I mean, they did beat Imperial right twice, so that's a big kind of confidence boost for such, like having these two new players added pretty much immediately before that event in terms of officials. That's a huge sort of confidence boost going into this Americas, where you know that Imperial are one of the favorites and you beat them. It kind of makes you kind of big yourself up and feel, maybe we could take on some of these top teams here, and that mental game could make the difference here. It does feel like Zevi is definitely an upgrade over Nithon and can really deliver maybe even above Safe's level when he was on the team. Safe at the moment is kind of not the level he was then, but also obviously the tier of competition is a little bit different. But for such a young guy coming in, really impressive, and Skulls as well, Brandon, you mentioned. So considering their only loss so far has been against I think Fluxo, that's pretty good signs early on. And yeah, I think the confidence boost of beating Imperial is just such a big mental boon going into the RMRs.
Yeah, I think they're a team that have been a bit unfortunate in that when they went to Cologne, for example, at the play-in, I feel like they got pretty unfortunate in the matches they had because they went out without getting a win, but they took Mouse to overtime in a BO1. Mouse did incredibly at Cologne. We all know that. And then they lost against Sprout, who I actually think were one of the teams who, again, were pretty decent at Cologne. I think they're a pretty decent EU team. That's a pretty tough elimination game to have in the play-in at Cologne. So even then, I think they were doing all right. It's just those were pretty tough matchups. And then you take into account the roster moves as well. And the thing I like now is that I've always really liked Big Uzera on this team for a long, long time, but he's like not even statistically one of the best players on this team anymore. He's like third on this team. I still think he's one to look at as having a lot of impact just because of the way he plays. But they just look like a really good roster. And I actually do wonder how much other teams will prepare for them or whether they will get slept on a little bit. I feel like other teams should probably be ready for them now, though, especially with that Melbourne result like Yumi was talking about. I think they probably are just about good enough. I think they've got that really well-rounded roster now. They have those star players that they need. And I think they're probably good enough at this point, honestly. I really like where this team's at, and I agree with you guys. I think they're the team that a lot of people might sleep on, but they're way better than you actually realize.
So we're all on the pain train, yeah?
Hell
good.
Yeah.
All right. Amazing. I know you like that one, Yumi. I'm gonna come to you next because a team that I feel like you're interested in, and you've kind of spoken to me a little bit about them, is Oplano, right?
Oh God, not this one.
Talk
I thought you were
to
going
me.
a completely different direction.
No. We're going to talk about Oplano. Do they have a plano, or is it just strictly no plano?
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I just have a sneaking suspicion because this is a new build of a roster for Oplano. So for them to have made their way into this America's RMR is also a good step in the right direction. They've also brought in Zeus. He's come back. He's out of the woodworks, and he's going to be standing behind them. I actually do think this team has some legs behind it. I've always thought KNG was a great player, and I'm actually a bit surprised by the players that I wasn't really familiar with, in like Cake and Pyria, who have been around the Brazilian scene for quite a long time, but have also never really been standouts. They seem to be actually providing enough support to the stars of this team. Yell and KNG, sorry, are they're enough firepower. I think that they could cause an upset could cause an upset against teams, and I think that they're honestly my weird dark horse for this event. It's not even really quantified in anything. I just have this sneaking suspicion Oplano are going to sneak in somehow. But then the more I think about the teams that actually I have going as favorites, they're all pretty stable teams as well. So they would have to really stretch them to overtimes or something of the sort.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry,
I'm kind of weirdly with Yumi. Yeah, I don't know This team actually, the more I look at it, the more I realize this team is a little better than I realized. Because some of these names, yeah, like I remember Piriazen being a player I was actually pretty excited about, and then I feel like he just kind of went missing for a while. I think Neck is actually a pretty solid player, even though he was removed from Pain. I feel like he was never bad on that team, so I think it was pretty good to get him in. And then it seems like Yell is in-game leading. I just had to check that because I know KNG has flirted with in-game leading in the past. Weirdly enough, KNG was actually kind of weirdly okay when he was initially in-game leading, which was funny. But this team actually has a bit of talent. I just don't know if they've had Zeus helping them for long enough, because I do believe in Zeus as a coach, but it doesn't seem like he's been here for long. I think he was initially added like 10 days ago. So maybe he was working with them a bit before then. But it's actually not a bad team. That's a team that could cause some upsets, actually. I'm with you, Yumi. You sold me.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm not sold. I don't know. I like the narrative, but like when we look at how many slots are available and kind of the competition, I think it gets really tough for them considering, as a 5, they've not really been playing together that long. Zeus only very recently coming in. Obviously, KNG and Yell are fragging really well, but like the opponents they've been going against also haven't been the toughest either. And I feel like the RMRs is just going to be a step maybe too soon for this roster, but I'm willing to be wrong, but I don't feel like they're going to make it through. There's just not enough room to do it.
Yeah, since becoming Oplano, they've played Fluxo twice, who are an up-and-coming Brazilian team, I'll have you know. New Phelps project. Keep an eye out on them. And they have also lost to them once. So, I mean, it does leave itself a lot to be desired. Maybe. Fluxo also don't look the greatest all of the time. So this might just be one of those variance teams that, wake up the right side of the bed, have your breakfast, and hey, you're opening games. Maybe you'll find some success early on. I'm kind of on the Oplano, they're coming for you.
It's also just that I've seen KNG have games where he really actually does take over. He actually is a very good player. So that's the other thing that obviously goes towards them a little bit. In a BO1, I could see KNG actually taking over occasionally.
I feel like the issue for me is I feel like KNG sold me down the river a couple of times because I've always been like, yes, KNG, and then he doesn't perform, and I'm no KNG. So for me, I'm gonna split the room. Oplano, not for me.
I don't think they're making it, but like I think they're going to be better than you expect.
Yeah, I agree. I think they won't go 0-3. Like they'll pick up a win here and there. I think a team just kind of hasn't really had enough time, to be honest, and I feel like this is maybe a step too far. Is the Isurus project, because that project's actually really interesting to me. That's an Argentinian roster. They've got Mayan back in. They've got younger players coming in, such as Luchov, Reversive, with Noxie and Deco. I mean, like, it's a cool idea. I've watched them play recently, and I haven't honestly been that impressed with them, but somehow they always make it and they get it over the line. They're one of these teams that somehow just digs in deep and can get a series through in their favor. But the style of CS that they play, the fundamentals and the systems, I'm not honestly completely sold on it. That's just my personal opinion. Yumi, you got anything on Isurus?
Yeah, when I've watched them as well, it's kind of the same story. Isurus have been around the same for quite some time, even with like new additions and trying to go back to players that they've had before. It just feels a little bit rinse repeat, and they are recycling some of their talent from previous iterations of lineups just to find something that works. And I think they're fine enough being like a feeder team within the region, and it always felt like they were a feeder team. They haven't really made much progress in the 2.5 years that I've been tracking this roster, so I have kind of no faith that they're going to do that much damage at this event, because they're okay. They're definitely above average within the region, but when you extend that to North America as well, they are, I think, they're a shark out of water.
Nice.
I mean, I like the addition of Mayan, right? Like these guys coming through. It's very recent, but he's always been a player that I've found kind of fun to watch. But yeah, I agree. It's just the caliber of competition, the fact that they've made this change with these 3 new players coming in so recently, just feels like they're just going to be flopping about and fish out of water. Okay, that wasn't as good as your analogy. Damn.
I'm actually, I haven't really seen this team, but I'm actually just a little surprised that Mayan isn't the highest rated player on this lineup. Noxy is above him, so I guess
Yeah,
I'll be watching out for him for sure.
Mayan's not been playing very well on this roster since coming back in.
Okay, that's a shame.
He has the occasional game where it's like, okay, pop off King, and then he just goes red for like a few maps. So yeah, I'm down on Isurus. However, another South American team that we could be up on, Lucy, talk to me a little bit about Furia. I mean, they played incredibly well at Pro League. Que Serato, that's a nice little kind of revitalization. I mean, comfortable, I'd imagine, coming through these RMRs.
Oh, super comfortable. Fury are looking incredible at the moment. Their form looks so solid. Que Serato, you mentioned, I mean, particularly his T-side rifling has been so impressive. I think he's one of the few players that's sort of been putting up these incredible positive T-sides. And with him and Yuri also being that consistent kind of second rifler alongside him, it feels like this team is just built to win, particularly in the RMR. Safe kind of touched on him earlier. He's kind of the weak point, I think, in terms of he'll hit those shots when they come, but he's not like the massive playmaker. They kind of rely a lot sometimes on art and like just sort of opening something up by doing his art things. And he's like probably my favorite player in Counter-Strike just because he's so unique. But his variance is definitely an issue with this team. He's so volatile. Sometimes he'll have these crazy games that are like 25, 30 kills. And then sometimes he'll be like 5 for 15 and still entry fragging every round and dying. But it doesn't really matter if Que Serato is doing what he's been doing lately. So I think just based on that current form, should be a very easy run for them.
I don't know if you wanted to jump in first, but I like this team because Art can be like a superstar level player in certain games. Like he can actually just take over games at certain points, albeit it's probably like once in every 7 or 8 maps, or maybe even higher than that. But Yuri and Que Serato have kind of been trading places for the spotlight on Furia for a while. I think Yuri usually wins out, but if both of those players are able to keep like a mean level, like they have been doing between themselves, and Art can have big performances, I don't think that this roster has any issues. The problem has been whether or not Safe can get involved and how much impact Drop can have, because Drop is doing a lot of role filling on this team, and he's doing, I think, a pretty bang up job of it. But in some late rounds, you still sometimes wish that he could get like an extra kill or maybe like a secondary kill that could just tie the bow on a round and allow for him and Safe to maybe clutch something. I want more out of Furious still, but they are another stable pick, I think, coming out of this RMR that shouldn't see too many teething issues, because I mean, you've got that trifecta of riflers that should just dominate, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. It's a team that are definitely safe to make it through. Oh, I forget that Safe's on this team, man. That's I'm so sorry. I apologize. I did not intend that. But yeah,
it's not Yumi and Hawker. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's a weird one with Furia, because I did obviously love this team when they came onto the scene out of nowhere. You had no expectations for them, and they suddenly just become a top team in the world. And now they've just been at this level forever where you kind of know what you're going to get from them. You feel like they're going to be pretty much the same team the entire time. They've never been able to make an AWP work. Funnily enough, they were able to make an AWP work, I feel like, when they had Henny. That was the times where it was kind of working. But since then, they haven't been able to find anyone who's able to fit onto this team. And I'm almost starting to get to the point where when you have Que Serato and Yuri, who are this good as riflers, it is starting to get a little frustrating when you feel like, could they maybe do more somewhere else? Could there maybe be a better team? Could they actually be competing for trophies? Because I don't see this Furia team right now ever competing for trophies, sadly. They are a really cool team, though. They have their unique style. I do kind of agree with you about Drop, that I think is quite a smart player. I do see him getting some really good value out of his spots when he's able to catch his opponents off guard. But I feel like if he's in a spot where he's having like a fair fight against someone else, it's very rare that he exceeds my expectations. Like you were saying, it's very rare that he's going to get some crazy highlight play, which maybe is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, the main thing is just that when is Furia gonna get an AWPer? I don't know. I honestly kind of want to see them just get an AWPer who's wild again, and will just try and fight anyone. Because it doesn't seem like Safe is that, sadly.
Safe is supposed to be the guy in Brazil, though. Like, he was he was recognized as the talent to pick up for Furia, so it was supposed to be a slam dunk. But it's like he can't keep up. His little legs can only carry him so far after Art, unfortunately.
It's
I
the
feel
OC
like-
problem, though, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
the same sort of boat, right? It's
Yeah,
almost
100%.
the same situation because you've got your Kinder. Art is kind of to find that style, and your Kinder is perfected it in a way. It's slightly different between them, but very similar in terms of the aggression. And yeah, OC and Safe very similar. That they're putting out good performances, but it's not that superstar that could take them to the next level.
All right, I'm gonna throw a statement out there, Hawker. I want you to take it in. Firstly, take a moment after I say this, and then I want you to just kind of explain why I might think this, and then
Here we go. Here
either-
comes Brandon's nuclear take. for the
either
episode. Here we go.
And you have to
criticize it-
justify it. You
either-
want us to justify it
either
somehow.
criticize it into oblivion or agree with me. Okay, so now Malik is back as a strategic coach for EG. They will make it through the RMR.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I thought it was going to be some crazy take with Furia. I was getting ready. I was
No,
like,
Drop on
"Ooh."
the off or something.
0-3.
Yeah, drop on the AWP. Everyone else on the AWP. No, yeah, I agree with you. I think EG are good enough now. It is kind of weird because just the names on this roster, if I'd have looked at it years ago, obviously I'd have been pretty excited with some of them. But I look at the names on the roster now, and I really don't get excited. I think I've just been tarred by how bad EG have been for so long. But if I take that bias away, yeah, they've got pretty good players. Automatic has literally never been bad. I don't think it's possible for him to play badly. He's just always at least a pretty good player, which is nice. Neelan was a weird pickup, but I think he's doing a solid enough job. It is obviously just weird in general, the whole EG scenario, but I think they have picked out Hext, who has been someone talked about for a long, long time as one of the next NA players. So I'm glad he is getting that opportunity. Yeah, I think they're just about good enough. Based on what we've seen, I think they should be making it through. I'm with you, Brandon. It's not that hot of a
All
take.
right.
You're going to have to come up with a different one.
I will. Don't worry. There's more.
Yeah, you know what?
Oh.
I'm not with you at all.
Okay.
I'm willing to burn the bridge for EG, and I want them to bomb out simply so they can finally just get rid of the unfortunate tumor that is sat on this roster.
Yeah.
They have like two superstars from earlier iterations of this roster. I want you to look at the stats for Cirque.
Yeah.
And if you look at his all-time rating, it's not so bad. It looks all fine and dandy. But he's being carried by 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017 version of Cirque, and not current version. The past 2 years have been really bleak for him as an AWPer. And I think if we're gonna levy criticisms at OC, we almost
Yes.
can't ignore the fact that Cirque is unfortunately just not putting up those numbers. I don't know what's happened to him, what's happened in his whether it's like personal life or maybe just like mechanically he's feeling off. He might be an exceptionally hard worker, but you need to be able to get results at a certain point, especially if you're going to pull in new talent into a roster. Surely you want to shake things up with the players that are underperforming, and maybe that was what they were hoping for. Neelan's leadership shift would somehow see Cirque come back into action, but I just haven't seen it, and that's the main problem I have with this EG roster. I look at Breeze, I look at Cirque, and in some ways, I'm still holding on to a little bit of hope with Breeze, but Cirque has completely lost my faith, unfortunately. I'd like to see him grind back up to a post where he was looked at favorably again, instead of just sitting on this roster.
You've got to be careful, Yumi, because the EG management are listening to this, and what they're hearing is, so we need to pick up Junior. That's what they're hearing.
Let's not pick up a player that we've already got in our wings. We have 10 more. However, let's go outside and get some more. Let's keep adding to the roster. Eventually, we will take over America and be the only team in the RMR.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, I
Wow.
don't mind it. I mean, Cirque is obviously an issue. Also, his like just style of warping just makes it look way worse as well because he's just
Yeah.
he used to be such this like explosive playmaker style warper, and when that's not working, it looks even worse. So it's kind of like a double whammy for him. But I will say for Breeze, it does feel like he's kind of seeing a little bit of resurgence lately. It feels like he's finding a bit more of that form that he used to have, not at the same kind of superstar levels, but still quite good. And Automatic is at carry levels at the moment. He's the reason that EG, I think, were able to do the kind of things they were doing at EPL, even if they didn't quite make it through. Neil and I was like so interested in because I was worried about like how the vibes would mesh because like he came from such a different roster in K23, right? And then coming across to EG, completely different side of the world, completely different ecosystem. And to be honest, in what we've seen, like this team seems to be getting along well. The vibes are good. Hex is adding this level of positivity as well. I really like the pieces here because without the AWPing, this is a real strong contender alongside Complexity at kind of the top level of Americas, but it's not quite there yet. I still think it's enough to get through the RMRs though.
Just quickly, yeah, it's weird because I think it's actually a weirdly good pickup to get Nealon, just because you looked at the old versions of this roster and it was just so clear they had no structure. I remember so many rounds where they would just like default and just lose, and you would just be so frustrated. And I don't know who else you'd really get in NA. So I actually don't mind the Nealon pickup. And also, just to quickly back up the Cirque point with the stats, I was just checking for the last 3 months. He is the joint lowest rated player with Nealon with a 0.94 rating. So I think that speaks for itself, really.
Yeah.
It's
all right.
painful.
Look, we can bash EG and we can praise EG. I feel like we could have a whole episode dedicated to EG and what's
And all
going
their
on over
rosters.
there. And every single roster, they are literally the Pokemon collectors of NA. They've got all their rosters. They've renamed their teams black and white. It's literally filling up the Pokedex over there. So look, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about another team that I think is actually quite exciting. I feel like a lot of people have kind of got them on their radar. It's Team 1, qualified to Blast, qualified to Rotterdam, played domestically in Philadelphia, came 3rd and 4th. They actually lost to an EG roster in that one. So Yumi, are you? How are you feeling? We've been saying up, down. Where'd you land on Team 1?
I first off, I love Malbs, so I'm unfortunately a little biased, and I think that the core of this roster has looked good enough as well to still be relevant in the NA scene and actually still compete for kind of top positions in leagues. So you re-add Malbs into this roster, and it's just a fit that makes sense. You know, you've got a lot of already sort of built experience with this organization, but he's also, I think, worked with Maluk quite extensively in his time previously in Team 1, and so it shouldn't really take too much time for them to get up to speed, and the fact that they've already accomplished so much in such a short period of time is kind of a good indicator of that. They are probably my team that I have the most on the cusp, because I think that they could displace somebody like an EG or I don't know, an MIBR, maybe even a Complexity. Like, I think these guys, if they're put in a really pressure position, could still displace one of the teams that we'd maybe position as a favorite.
Yeah, they're just been grinding, right? And they've been doing pretty well. They can clean house against these kind of mid teams, I guess you could say. So I think, you know, the real question is against the other kind of 3-2-2-3 teams. They did lose to EG in the second RMR qualifier. They've had losses against MIBR and ATK and Challenger. So some of these teams that are in contention alongside them, it's a bit up and down, but definitely on the Malbs train. I think everyone is. I was actually looking, I didn't realize Maluk has been on this roster for almost 7 years. That's kind of crazy numbers for like one roster.
Yeah, that is wild.
Captain-esque, right?
It's like Mighty Max, but he didn't like get cut at any point.
Yeah. I this team is just a little strange because they've been on a really good run recently, but I think Lucy was putting it well in that they've been beating a lot of the teams that basically haven't made it here, I guess is the way of putting it. The teams that didn't quite make it to the RMR, they're beating pretty comfortably. And then it seems like they do play the other teams pretty close, but we just haven't seen them play against the top teams too much in the region. So for me, they are kind of the biggest question mark in that sense. And overall, I think the players are pretty solid. Obviously, Malbs goes without saying. I remember actually, I think TRK has always been pretty good. I know he isn't someone who gets a lot of shine, maybe, but I feel like his utility whenever I've seen him play has been solid. And this is the sort of team where he can be a bit more of a star. Whereas I think in the past, he hasn't always had that ability. I think it was on Double O Nation when he got called up. They were doing like a weird 6-man roster thing briefly. It always felt a bit strange. So I'm glad he's found like a home. It seems like he's doing pretty well on this team. Yeah, they're the team for me that I think I am least sure what level they will come in at. In that I think they should be competitive, but because I haven't seen them play against some of the top teams, they could actually be way better than I'm giving them credit for. I don't think I'm quite putting them through, but they are a team that you definitely need to watch out for here.
It's like a team of heavy hitters, basically, and you don't know if they're going to actually be able to put the structure together against the top teams. The biggest issue, right?
Would you say that's a comparable statement to potentially what you were saying about Oplano, where like you got heavy hitters, if they wake up on the right side of the bed, it's more expected? Or would you say, obviously, Team One, I would argue, is a more reliant Oplano, right?
Yeah. I think I think they've probably gotten more going for them in terms of just having worked together for such a long period of time. Like they won't be going into practices not sure what their map pool is, or whether they're going to change their permabans, or whether they're switching spots. I don't think there's any issues like that. So they are a stronger Oplano. That is a good comparison.
Yeah, Oplano doesn't have Malbs, so that's the difference.
Okay. No Malbs, no Major. Maybe. We'll see. Lucy, talk to me about 9Z. I know that we spoke a little bit off camera. You're quite on the 9Z hype train. I'll let you speak, and then I'll counter it, because I'm down on 9Z.
I can't believe you're down on them. I kind of rate them. They had those really great wins at Ruvet. Like, they kind of show what they can do. And I like the fact that they're investing in young talent, right? They've got NQZ coming through on the AWP, 17 years old. This kid's just coming through and just fragging out. Buddha, who's also 19, he's come from their academy roster. And I just love when these academy rosters are used in this way. I think it's obviously sort of emerging as the future. And it's kind of cool seeing the South American teams get on that kind of bandwagon. But yeah, I think this is a team that, again, kind of flies under the radar for people, similar to Pain, and they could come through, get on a good run. I don't think they're going to 3-0 or 3-1 or anything crazy like that, but I think they're definitely on that cusp, and they have a huge amount of upset potential.
Yeah, I like 9Z. And I actually think the new players do their job just fine. Buddha's like a site anchor that seems to play the positions to a decent level. You've got NQZ as well as 17-year-old Orper, who is actually another. It seems like a very solid pickup in terms of identifying and scouting young talent, which 9Z aren't scared of doing. That's how they found Try. That's how he ended up in 0 Nation. And to have somebody that they're so willing to actually put through the paces again in much the same way and try and build them into the Orper they need him to be, that's super exciting for me. My main concern is, as much as I like Buddha as much as I like Buddha, I do think that the travel to Europe will be a bit of a detriment to him, unfortunately. And I expect that he will probably have the biggest hit performance-wise, because weirdly enough, NQZ came into this roster and the first thing they did was fly him to Europe for a boot camp, which was kind of mental. Like, that's just how the timing worked out, and they were satisfied enough, I think, with what he produced over there. So this is just going to be, his secondary or third trip that he's going to make to Europe to compete. And I don't think that 9-0 or another, I would actually put them in the same boat as Team 1, where I think they've got enough firepower between DGT and Max and David to make this team more than viable. And if the youngsters show up as well, then they are definitely a big threat that people are going to have to look at.
I'm really glad that you called on the kind of inconsistency in the performance hit for traveling over to Sweden for the youngsters, because that's why I am down a little bit on them. They are in Europe currently. They've been here for a little bit. They have been boot camping. They played against Honoris the other day. Honoris, the Polish roster with Taz, who is still playing. And well, Buddha, bottom of the server, -17. So really,
hey, I'm looking at this game too. Taz is also bottom of the server, -19. So I mean, if we're throwing punches here.
We can throw punches. I mean, the Honoris have been playing okay, but Taz has been lagging behind for quite a while. So credit where credit is due. Both of them didn't have a great game, and then you look at NQZ as well, had a below 1 rating. So it's exactly, it was just kind of echoing your sentiment of two youngsters performing at the bottom. Bit worried about how they will perform. For me, they're a 2-3 team.
Yeah, I was really impressed with NQZ, particularly when I saw him at Rubet. I got to commentate some of those games, and we had very little expectations. And I was so impressed. He actually looks like one of those AWPers where you just get the feeling that he can make plays, right? You kind of get the one side of AWPers where you feel like they're just going to do their job, and occasionally they might get a few nice shots. But NQZ was actually winning rounds where you probably gave him very little chance, and then he would come in and have a highlight play. So just that alone makes me really excited about him. This just feels like quite a top-heavy team to me. I agree with Yumi that NQZ, DGT is great. Those two are really good on this team. I think Max is pretty good. And while I am glad they changed out Rox, because I don't think he was good enough to play at this level. I don't know if Buddha is a player who's going to really be the solution. I don't think David's that great either. It just feels to me like they've got like a really solid start to the team, and then it just slowly tapers off for me. And I think those weak points might just drag them down a bit too much.
All right. Yumi, I'm going to hit you with another statement. I gave Hawk one. I'm going to give you one now. Because you were talking about Team 1 kind of being on the cusp. I'm going to bucket them with another team. And I'm going to say 0-0 Nation are actually kind of dark horses with all these additions bringing in Taco. I can see your face. Talk me through what I've just said. Tell me why I'm wrong. And yeah, go for it.
I actually have 0-0 Nation as one of the favorites, weirdly enough. I really liked the Taco system coming over from Godsent. So, I mean, you're not wrong. I think they are maybe a team you underestimate, and, you know, that's the dark horse, isn't it? But I do believe that they've got exactly what they need with Dumao, Lado, Taco. You know, I don't even... weirdly enough, if this was +2 any other sort of mid-range Brazilian players, I would have said they are a comfort pick, you know, in kind of the same way I would maybe lump... maybe not a comfortable pick, because, again, there's only so much room. But they would be competing for slots with the likes of like an MIBR and a Team 1, all on the same level of the bracket. I think they would get pretty scrappy towards the end of the tournament with these guys involved. But then you consider that Tri actually looks better now with 0-0 Nation than he ever did under the previous leadership, because there wasn't really proper leadership under 0-0 Nation before. And coldzera apparently is, you know, just getting in with the system. I think Taco went on HLTV confirmed where he's just kind of talking about how there wasn't as much pushback, or they kind of aired their dirty laundry and were just moving on to try and win, as opposed to holding any gripes, grudges, or anything over the past about how they might have operated previously. I think coldzera is trying his best alongside Tri to implement into the system. So I'm genuinely very, very convinced that 0-0 Nation will make it through. I will add this caveat that there is probably this like 5% chance in the back of my mind that they could also just go 0-3 because they just get off the ground in a very awkward way. But I think they can jump through.
All right.
Yeah, I like this team quite a bit. The first thing that always sticks out to me is I was interviewing Taco at one point, and he said Dumao is the hardest working player he has ever played with in his career. So that's over any of the previous guys. He said Dumao is an incredibly hard worker. It definitely comes across in the way he plays. He's a super smart player. He pretty much always makes good decisions for me on this team. I don't think he's got the potential to be like a crazy standout star, but he always makes good decisions, which I really like. Tri has definitely been solid on this squad. As you were saying, I actually weirdly like Taco's in-game leading in that he just does a couple of weird things every now and then. He just throws in a couple of weird rounds or creative little rounds that can oftentimes catch opponents off guard. And the only real question for me is actually the coldzera point, because for just such a long time, he's just not been living up to the level I would expect from him. I don't know if he's just being given less space on this team or what? Because I could imagine there being some overlap with him and Dumao in terms of roles. But even then, I think you would have to expect coldzera stats-wise should be doing a bit better. But this team is just pretty solid for me overall. I agree. I think they make it.
Yeah, I think coldzera is a really tough one to read because 2021 was such a hard year for him, right? Like it was in phase for the longest time, then he was in complexity, and it was all very strange. Never really felt like he was ever comfortable. Taking him a little bit, I still am not completely convinced, but I'm hoping that with these changes with Taka and Dumao also coming in and sort of alleviating some of that fragging as well. I mean, Dumao is the real deal. I'm really impressed by him. Tries looking so much better as well. It feels like this team has a lot of potential. coldzera is the big question mark for me if they want to kind of do, be one of the best teams in Brazil. They look pretty good at Cologne though, and I think that's already convinced me enough, particularly when they were taking out wins against Imperial and Astralis, and I think they even could have beat Liquid in that series as well. So definitely, I don't know if you'd even call them a dark horse because the name recognition alone sort of puts them, I think, in many people's minds as a team to go through.
Yeah, there's a spotlight shone on them regardless. So how can you be the dark horse in the light? It doesn't make any sense.
It's also quickly a good point on the Cologne thing that they were again another team who get like knocked out really early, and then you look at the results and it's like you lost against FaZe 2-0, but you went double digits on both maps. And then you lost against Liquid, and Elige had to carry so hard in that one. Yeah, that was a really unfortunate way for them to go out. So definitely think they're better than the placement shows at Cologne.
Okay, so my hot take's not really that hot. We'll try one more. Lucy, personally for me, here's a statement: MIBR don't make it through the RMR. Not very impressed with how they've been performing. Yeah, they do all right domestically, but for me, not RMR worthy. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Again, I don't know if that's really that hot take after we've discussed some of these teams. It feels like losing.
Brandon, boo.
Yeah, your take suck. Losing Cello really hurt them, I feel. Henny, I like. I feel like he's dropped off my radar a little bit for a while, and we know what he's capable of. So maybe there's saving here. But yeah, I've not been convinced by their recent performances, and to me, there's still some issues with this roster. I'm not 100% convinced on it, and I just given the level of competition, I can't see them making it through.
Yeah, they're another 3-2, 2-3 kind of team for me, unfortunately. I really like Turtle, but he's not even playing the roles that he was good at on Rivado like ages ago. So I'm kind of down on him as a player, but BR Enezen or Bruno or whoever this guy is, really solid player alongside Henny. And I think you add that in combination with somebody like Jota, they've got a lot of really strong firepower, but it's just again one of these teams on the cusp. And I agree that the disruption with Cello leaving and then them having to figure out who's going to in-game lead, and it felt like they lacked a little bit of direction, especially in the early days. I think we all were able to sort of watch them do not great in the early stages, but I think they've had enough time that they can settle on something that works well enough that they could sneak in.
Oh, I feel like for MIBR, for me, you're talking about that they took a little bit of while to kind of get used to systems, like adjust. I feel like that was still a case with Cello though, because with Burnsin, or however we are pronouncing it, Biara Ala Enazan, however you want to do it. He came in from MIBR Academy. They put him on the AWP, and he's not an AWPer. That was the big confusing thing to me. And obviously, yes, they bring in Henny, who's that name figure. You then put BRN on the rifle. I'm still not convinced. I still don't think they really entirely know what they're doing over there.
I honestly believe that they had already settled that they were going to pick up an AWPer, but they hadn't come to a contractual agreement with Henny or whoever they were looking at the time, and they were still maybe bouncing between them. And they just said, okay, well, we're going to bring you into the team. So can you AWP for us while we're sorting all this stuff out? That could very unfortunately, business isn't quite as easy as just like, oh, well, our AWPer is going to, or we're going to get rid of our AWPer, and the team wants to get rid of them now. What's the solution? There has to be sometimes there's that stopgap. Like we looked back at NIP, and the more I've reflected on it, the more I've been like, well, they are just want to change things, and they've decided to change things, and the business almost can't keep up with that. This almost felt like they had decided that they were going to bring him up first, and then realized like, oh wait, yeah, we actually do need that AWPer like ASAP.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it is a weird one with MIBR because I agree with you that I think they just about don't make it, but they should be a pretty good team based on these players. It's a weird one. I really like BR Enazan. We keep saying his name. I really like him. I think he gets a lot of impact with his kills. Henny's pretty good. Like I don't think there's any bad players on this roster. So I don't really know why they haven't done a bit better. I guess maybe their Pro League group is what I'm thinking back to, but they did have a kind of tough group there. Maybe you would say the game against Big is the one they could have looked to try and cause another upset in. But I just remember them getting completely blown out on Dust 2. And normally that's the map where I actually feel like this team is pretty good and has a chance to upset on. And they got that as the decider. And then they lost like 16-1. So that was a bit disappointing. So I don't know, maybe I'm overrating the Pro League groups just because they did go up against tough teams there.
Mhm.
They seem to be beating the regional competition. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't know, there just feels like there's something missing with this team. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not really like a perfect hot take, but it's the fact that you think about NA, you think about the Americas, and your mind also, well, my mind just kind of goes MIBR. So the fact that MIBR are in the conversation of a team that doesn't quite make it is a little bit of a surprise. I feel like, look, there's 4 teams left that we can discuss. I feel like we kind of almost group them into one, and we can talk about them together rather than in isolation. And we've got ATK, Nouns, Arctic, and Infinity. Arctic and Infinity, especially for me, they're not really 100% on my radar. I know Infinity are doing well in NACCT, but the caliber of teams at North America CCT is really low comparatively to firstly some of the other regions, but secondly just the level in America. So I think it's cool that their story is that they've made it here. They've got underrepresented players. Does anyone want to jump in and speak about Infinity quickly, or are we just saying, okay, they won't make it, let's just move on?
I think it's cool to have Peru, Mexico, Colombia to have these represented. The RMRs, obviously, it'd be really cool to see them on the stage, but yeah, it feels unlikely. They're kind of even on the edge of like Challenger, right? They're placing in advance, so it's just a whole step up for them. But I do like get to see some other countries in South America represented instead of just the South America with the occasional Argentinian team.
Yeah, the problem I have with this team is that they have been grouped together as like 3 or 4 players on this squad for quite a long time, and this is probably the most notable thing that they have done so far in their 2 or 3 years of working together. This is a new height for them, so expectations are probably all over the place. They probably weren't expecting to get here to a certain degree. They were probably just competing like they have in previous open qualifiers to get into a position like this. And this time they make it. Like I'm excited for them. I'll agree on that. But there is such a you have to manage expectations when you're going up against favorites in your region that you typically lose to, versus also North American competition that are competing at tier 1 relatively frequently. There isn't space. They probably don't get a win, but they're probably just going to be happy with the experience to a certain degree. Like they'll get some time to boot camp in Europe. They'll get some time to then also fight against some strong teams as well at the event.
Yeah. All right, cool. Holger, anything, or is it just all covered?
I think they summed it up pretty well. Yeah.
All right, talk me through Arctic then. Do we know too much about Arctic, guys, or are we kind of in the same boat of similar experience? They're just happy to be here. Congratulations to them for making it, but realistically, there's not a chance.
Average age is like 20, so yeah, I think they're just happy to be here.
Yeah,
I think they have been on the rise for a little bit, from my understanding. Like, I've seen them crop up more and more in like deep in tournaments, but then when I've ever watched any of their games, they've not looked great. I think the one player that I would have maybe looked at to be someone to keep your eye out for is maybe Short or maybe History. I don't know. these aren't names that I'm super familiar with. Like this is like one game I maybe watched months ago, but they have some okay talent. It's again just they're a little bit far away from the usual stomping grounds with the teams they're facing.
I'm excited just that there's new names, because honestly, I don't know any of these names. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you just want to go off the HLTV rating, History has a 1.25 rating. So there you go. He's my pick, I guess. I can read out
Pauper
stats
though,
for
isn't
you.
he? So
Oh, you know, that's what you look at. I also just like how those are fully in my head like Asian CS names. I imagine like a Chinese player just picking a random English word like history. That's my name. Sure.
biology.
Yeah, they just have, yeah. For some reason, it gives me Asian CS vibes, but no, apparently they're Brazilian. So I'd see them.
All right. Happy you're here, Arctic. Good luck, but no expectation.
Why are you shouting them out specifically?
I'm just shouting everyone out, bro. We're going through the entire team.
Hey, Arctic, you my guy. You go have fun.
All right. Nouns, you have fun as well. I mean, we there's some names on the Nouns roster that we know. B Wills, Cynic. They're guys that have been knocking about the scene for quite a while. Again, same bucket, I think. Good that they've been picked up by an organization. Nouns, a really good esports org, variety of games that they're interested in. Nice to see them delve into the North American scene and pick up these guys. I think, again, happy to be here. Might get a win. I would rank them higher than Arctic and Infinity. I reckon they will pick up a win, but I don't see them going through again.
Yeah.
Semphis coaching them, apparently. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is the Gaming Gladiators squad after that apparently ended poorly. I don't know anything about the specifics of that. The organization split up, but
cool. Yeah, I will quickly say that Sexy or Suxy or however you say his name, CXC,
I think.
There you go. That however you say his name, I actually think he has the potential to be like a tier 1 CS player. I think he's really good. It just sounds like it's just a question of can he stick with it and stay consistent practice-wise, because I've seen him have some unbelievable games. I think he's a real talent, but I don't know if he'll be able to fully put it together. But I'm excited to see it. I also think that based on the names on this team, yeah, they'll be all right. I feel like they could maybe do something, but I don't see them making it.
Okay, well, our final team to talk about is an interesting one. It's ATK. They've kind of juggled their roster around quite recently. They actually delved into Europe. They picked up Truth and Bodenmaster, and then Truth kind of went back to the Skate X project. Didn't have the best results with ATK. They picked up Swisher, who was in Bad News Bears for a little bit. I'm going to open this one up to the floor. ATK, again, another one I'd group with. Out of all of these teams we've just spoken about, they're the best, I'd argue, and I feel like that they're going to do okay, but I can't see them going through the RMR.
I want to, because Spray seems like a nice guy, and they still got some of the South African squad of, I think, what used to be JT's old boys.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to see these guys still floating around. I think MOTM as well is somebody that I've know has been talked about in the scene for quite a long time. I think ATK have a surprising amount of firepower. The problem that I have with them even diving into Europe is that they went for players that are not exactly very approachable. I think if you were looking at making it like a competitive tier 2 European team, like they wouldn't have been players that you had massively on your radar, and that's my main concern, because I think they probably brought some of the European culture with them in terms of like work ethic and practice and what to expect from teams, how you would prepare for games, and then they just kind of went back to going North American, which I don't know if that's because of like visas or there's a multitude of different reasons that they could think of for swapping him out for a North American player. But ATK are kind of are my weird silent killers this event. I'd probably even say more so than a Team 1 in terms of the amount of eyes that are on them versus what kind of result they can maybe get.
That's a hot take.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I said anyone to just jump in, but no one said anything.
No, yeah, I agree. Like they've done a pretty good job at keeping a couple of the NA players that I think are the ones to watch. MOTM, Swisher. These are both guys that I've always thought have been standouts on their teams in the past. And I've always been weirdly impressed whenever I see them play. They always just seem to do a bit better than I expect, and they always seem to be competitive. So they're just in that similar boat where, unfortunately, there are quite a few good teams in this America's RMR, so you can't really say they're going to make it through. Like, even towards the lower end, as you were saying, some of the South American teams like 9Z, Team 1, they just feel a bit more solid to me than ATK. But I guess it is nice to have at least a little bit more NA representation in here, because there aren't that many actual NA teams or players here, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Team 1 can play in the NA one because they live in NA. They've been there so long that they have become the North Americans when they aren't, that they are.
I think it's also cool having some South African players there, because it's really hard for these players to kind of, like, South African scene in particular. I mean, I come from a very small region, but the Oceanic scene kind of at least gets some recognition. You know, we got our own kind of RMR with Asia, but for South Africa, it's a real struggle. So it's a really good commitment from these players to be able to kind of stick with this org and the org to kind of commit to keeping South African CS alive. You know, that's really cool. So I hope they do well. They've had some wins against teams like Team 1 before in NA, so they could potentially get a couple of wins here. But yeah, it feels like the tier competition is a little too high for them.
It's a cool story though.
Yeah.
You know, Complexity maybe going up against ATK. I think Floppy and OC were both on that roster as well, so it'd be like fighting old chums back in the server.
Yeah, it's some really cool storylines. We've got them across all of the regions. I think to end this, let's just do a quick fire. We've done it with the other regions. We're going to do it with this one as well. Making it through, yes or no. Remember, we've got one Legends spot. We can only pick 6 teams to go through, okay? So it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I feel like we're going to be on the same page for the first 3. Okay, so Liquid making it through, yes. Complexity making it through, yes. Furia making it through, yes. All right, so we got 3. Imperial making it through. I think everyone's a yes.
You know where I stand. I'm saying no.
Oh, I'm a yes.
I think you guys are going to outvote me, so.
Oh, Yumi's thinking about it.
Join the dark side.
Yeah, I know. I am.
Do you want to put them in maybe?
Well, yeah, can we leave them aside for now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pain.
I think I'm more confident in Pain than Imperial, personally. I'd say yes.
I'd say yes for Pain.
Maybe on Pain. I don't know.
Yeah, can we juggle?
Yeah,
can we juggle these guys?
Juggle the Brazilians over here.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Let's do some ones. Let's just jump down the list a little bit. Team 1.
No.
I'm going to say not quite. Not quite. They'll be close
as well. All right. ATK. No.
Nope.
Nouns. No.
No.
Arctic. No. Infinity.
No.
Nope.
Isurus. No.
Nope.
Oplano? No.
Oh my God.
Nah.
All right. EG.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you can say yeah.
They're also a maybe for me, but just because I can't decide on any of these guys actually.
All right.
Like
we're putting EG through. I'm the host. All right, EG's in. 9Z. I'm gonna say no.
See, I'm a yes.
I think no.
Yeah, I'm a yes on 9Z. I feel like
cool.
I think Pain
they go in the bucket.
Flip.
MIBR. That's a no.
It's probably a no from me.
Yeah, not quite.
All right. Okay.
We only have one more spot,
Did we say 00 Nation?
Okay, 00 Nation.
Yes.
So if I convince you guys no Imperial, then I'll say yes to 00 Nation.
Wait, we've got one spot out of Imperial, Pain, 00 Nation.
Wait, I thought Pain were already in. I thought we have Liquid, Furia, Complexity, Pain, EG. Is what
we have
I
triple NA. We've got EG, Complexity, Liquid, and then we've got Furia. So
I just feel like one of those teams isn't going to make it, and it's probably going to be EG.
I think they're good enough.
I think EG are fine.
Yeah, okay. It is close though.
It is hard. It's really difficult. Okay. So I've lost track a bit. So we did say Pain. Okay. So
maybe we said maybe.
No, I'm the one that levied that into a maybe.
I thought we said Imperial maybe, Pain maybe, 00 Nation maybe.
Okay, so we still have 2 spots.
maybe.
Then.
No, we have one spot.
One.
We have
Oh
one
wait,
spot.
who do we put through?
So we've got
Nine
Liquid
C.
Furia
We put,
Complexity.
oh my god, I forgot you guys put 9Z through.
No, we didn't.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Did
we
we
did.
maybe them? Oh,
No.
we're,
Oh,
we're
mate, I'm so
terrible at this.
lost.
Brandon, you should have been keeping track. What are you
Liquid
doing?
Furia.
No, we've got
Cool.
Liquid Complexity Furia, EG. We've got 2 spots, and in our maybes, we've got 9Z Imperial
Okay.
Pain. There we go. So out of 9Z Imperial and Pain, 2 can go.
Well, and
Through.
Double O Nation. I'm putting Double O Nation.
And Double
in
O
the maybes
Nation,
for
yeah,
sure.
of course. Okay, so Imperial Pain, Double O Nation, 9Z. This is a train wreck at the end of the episode, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, there's,
can tell you
there's a
for
lot of teams at
me-
the same level.
For me, it would be Pain and Double O Nation is what I'd take.
Opposite that, I'm going Imperial 9Z. Let's go.
I'm doubling
Alright.
up on Hawker's side, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
So what are you? Sorry, what?
Sorry.
I'm
Storyline.
also doubling up on 00 Nation Pain, probably.
See, I'm 0-0. The
Oh,
thing is,
here
I think I believe Imperial Pain. I don't think you take 00 Nation. It's
That
okay.
could
So
maybe be the best of both worlds because I'm pretty strong on Pain, and I think it seems like you guys are pretty strong on Imperial. So maybe
Okay.
that's the balance.
So we say
I can live
look.
on
How
that.
about we compromise it? We say that and we say 00 Nation. If it was one team to make it through and break our predictions, it would be them.
yeah.
Everyone happy with that?
I'm
You mean?
happy.
Yeah,
look at me.
I mean that's a cop out. I would have them in there, but I'm fine. I'm willing to compromise.
I would
here.
have them in there over Imperial.
I'm not ready to
I'm
throw
convinced
hands.
Imperial aren't making it.
That's good because look, we haven't got enough time on the episode to get into a
Yeah.
fist fight. You, I feel like you beat me anyway. So that does conclude our little podcast for the Americas Armor. Has anyone got any closing thoughts before we end the episode, or are we all good? What was
Imperial aren't making it. They are not making it. It's
Yes,
you
for
heard
the
it here
next yes
first.
major.
Any of the other EG rosters could have made it here.
Ooh.
I don't agree with that.
Especially EG.
You asked me for a closing thought.
All right, cheers, thanks.